But WARBAND was specifically made with modding in mind, and the community is still making mods for it to this day. And it's such an entire topic on its own that it would need an entire video just to talk about it, which is what I'm going to do. Seeing how many people love WARBAND and its mods, I've decided to make another video, this time playing the mods recommended to me in the comments of my previous video. At this point I've made 2 videos showcasing my favorite mods, and after getting several more suggestions, here we are again for part 3. But even then the suggestions did not stop, so basically I went through all of my videos' comment sections, and finally I have enough recommendations to do a favorite mod videos part 4. Today, I'm going back on over a dozen videos made on WARBAND mods. All of my attempts to clear the spreadsheet of all the WARBAND mods you've been recommending have failed. And when I tried to make a final video on the best WARBAND mods, you still gave me more. There are so many mods on WARBAND that I've made videos after videos covering all of these mods. Every time I thought I was done, people just kept recommending more mods for me to play. I even tried to make a ranking. I ranked 42 mods for WARBAND, and people still kept recommending them. At this point, I must be close to like 70 mods. The mods never end. They never stop. There's so many of them. They are so good. Whatever you like, there's a mod for you. So, here we are again. This is my Christmas gift to you guys to end the year 2023 on a high note. If you're watching this in 2024, well, take it as a New Year gift. And if you're watching this in 2025 and beyond, well, it's never too late to watch the video, it's never too late to discover some new mods, and it's never too late to subscribe either. So here we go. This is a ranking of all the WARBAND mods I've played so far, since the last time I did that. In the previous ranking video, I took a moment to explain how I was ranking the mods so that you would get my reasoning. And I think it's worth going over that again because I'm doing the same as before, I'm ranking the mods based on key categories, but these have changed a bit, so here they are. At first, we'll have the dumb mods. Mods for which it does not matter how good or well done they are, they just make for a silly, short experience. We then have cool on the surface. Mods that have a certain appeal, mostly visual, but don't bring many changes to the core of the game. We then have good, not my taste, which is just that, mods that are of good quality but don't really appeal to me personally. After that, good but redundant. This category is highly subjective obviously, I've played so many mods at this point that a lot of them appear similar to one another. That does not mean they are bad mods, it just means I experienced them in some capacity before I even tried them out. We then have pretty good, good mods, just not my favorites, followed by honorable mentions, and finally, my top picks. That's what we're working with, so let's do this. Okay, so here we go. At number 38, this is CSGO but WARBAND. Because if you did not feel like playing the free version of CSGO, which is already pretty old and will most definitely run on your machine, then you can always play this version on WARBAND, where basically all you'll be doing is just fighting in a battle royale with bunch of random NPCs, and that's all there is. This is basically the cheapest version of CSGO you could possibly find, though again it is still pretty well made, there's just really not much to it. Similarly at number 37, this is Warcraft 3 but Mount & Blade, so if you did not feel like playing Warcraft 3 and instead wanted to play an objectively worse version on Mount & Blade, well, this is the place to go. To be honest, it looks pretty good, but a lot of it is largely unfinished. The map is pretty bland, there's just not much going on, the scenery is pretty good, but most of the time that you're playing in third person, you have the massive HUD that you would also find in Warcraft 3, and because of that, half the bottom, including your character, is barely visible. The mod could be pretty good, but it's also very buggy and very wacky overall, so, At number 36, this is King of Fighters. This is another mod that went with a very strange experiment, the idea of making the character in 2D while keeping the rest of the world in 3D. Like honestly, it's pretty funny and it works about as well as you'd expect, but again, why would anyone ever play a mod like this? It's an interesting experiment for sure, but it's just really weird. In case it wasn't obvious already, these 3 mods were all made by the same modder, and I made one video covering all of his mods, which are all as wacky as it gets. These 3 mods are just bad in my opinion, but you can't deny that there was a lot of effort and ingenuity that went into them. However, we'll see the other 2 later down. And with that, we move on to the next category, cool on the surface, starting with number 35, the Eagle and the Radiant Cross. This mod is basically Mount & Blade in the Renaissance period, but besides the guns and the new armors, the mod doesn't bring much else. In fact, it tends to be extremely buggy and feels very incomplete, so as far as Renaissance mod goes, it's not the best. At number 34, we have Independence of Chile. This mod is a gun mod, similar to L'Aigle in that it's muskets all around, but besides the very immersive setting, there's really no changes to the gameplay with this mod. So it's a pretty good gun mod, but the experience has been offered by so many different mods that at this point, this one is kind of redundant. At number 33, we have Calradia Borderlands. If you felt like playing Calradia, but it's actually a much bigger map with more factions, then this mod is pretty much for you. But overall, it's just native Warband that feels a lot bigger, with a few extra features on the side, but nothing that really stands out in my opinion. At number 32, we have Wind of the War, which is yet another Renaissance mod, though this one is set in the entirety of Europe. This could be a pretty good equivalent to mods like 1257 AD, however, Wind of the War is both old and largely incomplete, with some settlements not having their full names, and most of the lords still being the ones from native. It's basically the Eagle and the Radiant Cross with a bit more polishing, but again, in terms of gameplay, it doesn't offer much else. At number 31, I never know how to say this one, this is Isklu mod, which is yet again another mod set in Calradia, though this one gives you a few more options. You can start as the ruler, and you can also customize your own troop trees, so it can be interested in that sense, but unfortunately for me, at this point, playing mods that are still set in native, you really have to do a lot more to stand out. And this mod, while it offers a few features, it's mostly features you can find in other mods that themselves bring more, so Isklu mod in that case, it's alright, but it's not amazing. At number 30, we have Golden Earth. This mod gives us a very interesting setting which covers the period when the Vikings first landed in North America and came in contact with the native. It's largely fictional obviously, but it's not a setting I've seen in any other mods, and as such that makes it pretty unique. You get to play as the native, which is pretty cool. However, the map is also very huge and also very sparse, there's very few bandits, and in terms of gameplay, there's basically no changes from native. So it's a beautiful mod visually, but there's not much else to it. At number 29, we have The Reckoning, The New Beginning. I've covered the Reckoning mods in their own separate video, and they're pretty cool as far as zombie mods goes, but The New Beginning set the bar much higher and failed to meet it. Basically, in this mod, it's much further in the future, the zombies have been turned into mutants that are practically impossible to kill, and that can make for some pretty badass moments in the mod, assuming you cheat, because otherwise the mod doesn't really offer much in the way of new features. There's really not much to do in this mod. In fact, you can recruit troops, but even these troops will have a really hard time killing the zombies. It's an interesting mod, it's very interesting visually, but it's largely incomplete, and as such, there's just not much else to it. At number 28, this is Snow in the East. Snow in the East covers World War II in the Eastern Europe front. You can play as the Soviet Union or even the Nazi regime. In terms of gun mods, it's pretty good, but as with any mods that go past muskets, battles can become very unbalanced as guns are so accurate, you can just have prolonged shootouts from across the map. Sieges are basically impossible without a lot of cannon fodder. Overall, Snow in the East is pretty immersive for the time period, however the gameplay is limited and there's just not that many options in terms of gameplay. At number 27, this is The Reckoning, the very first Reckoning. And this mod was actually pretty ambitious. This is the mod that introduced zombies, and it tried to introduce new mechanics such as scavenging. So in the mod, there's a lot of different settlements that can just be explored for loot, and they are festered with zombies, and basically a good chunk of the game is just going in these abandoned areas to get supplies that you can then trade for guns and ammo. Overall, the mod is pretty good for what it intended to do, but it also shows the limitations of Warband itself. As such, it's a pretty good fun mod to play around with, but once you get into it, The Reckoning also gets boring pretty quickly. The zombies are actually the weakest part of the game, though the NPCs are pretty dangerous. At number 26, this is New World 1521. Of all the mods that are cool on the surface, this is the one that grabbed my attention the most simply because of how beautiful it is. New World 1521 is set in Central America just as the conquistadors are coming into contact with the Aztecs. As such, the mod covers the natives from the time period, and their flamboyant weapons and costumes are simply mesmerizing. The mod is gorgeous in every sense of the word. The only problem is, it's extremely buggy. So you could play it and really enjoy it, but as soon as a battle gets too big, it's gonna crash, and because of that, there's just not much replay value. Moving on to the next category, which is cool but not my taste, we have at number 25, 12th Century. 12th Century is one of the only mods I play that is mostly focused on Asia, though this one stretches all the way to the Middle East. In terms of Asian medieval mods, this one is pretty good. The scenery, the items, the music, it's all pretty good. However, the mod is still a diamond in the rough in my opinion. Shields are practically non-existent, the markets are very limited, and the Middle East is basically useless. If you have a mod set in Asia, no one is gonna bother playing in the Middle East. As such, 12th Century can be a pretty good mod, especially if you want to build your own Mongolian horde. However, the mod feels very unbalanced, and there's still a lot more that needs to be done before I consider it like really solid. At number 24, this is Legacy of the Dragon. In terms of fantasy mods, this one checks a lot of the marks. There's a few spells, there's a bunch of fantasy species. However, I did not find the lore to be all that interesting. The dragons themselves are not particularly impressive, I'm sorry to say. And so in terms of fantasy mods, it's overall pretty complete, but there's just not that much that I find unique about it. At number 23, we have Rus 13th Century, Way of the Warrior. This mod takes us to the Middle Ages in Eastern Europe just as the Mongols are about to invade. And in terms of mods, it's actually pretty solid. It's immersive, it's got cool items and music. However, the mod was designed to be extremely hard, making it basically impossible to level up through fighting, making looting after a battle extremely risky for no reason. Everything is super expensive, everything is just overall more dangerous, and so it's a pretty good mod, but you'll only really enjoy it if you're into the hardcore mods, and in this case, I'm not. So let's move on. At number 22, in the new category, good but redundant, we have A New Dawn. In terms of revamped native, it's got a few interesting settings like the ability for small factions to create their own factions by taking over settlements, which in itself is pretty interesting. However, this is just another mod where more features are added to native, and I'm just so done playing those mods to be honest. So it's a good mod, but again, there's others that are similar, and you can easily avoid this one. At number 21, this is Sands of Faith. Sands of Faith is just one of the many Crusades mods you can have out there. And in terms of actual quality, it's pretty good. But again, there are many different Crusade mods that you can pick from, and Sands of Faith in that context doesn't really distinguish itself in any meaningful ways, except maybe the fact that you can play as a historical ruler, which is cool, but if that's all it adds, you could play this one, or In the Name of Jerusalem, or Crusades and Jihad, and you won't really see much difference. At number 20, we have Calrad Gur. Calrad Gur is a story-driven mod in which the goal is to make yourself the Emperor of Calradia, at which point all of Calradia will turn against you. While it is a pretty good concept, and I did initially enjoy the mod, in hindsight, I found the central quest to be fairly grindy, and the rest of the mod itself does not bring much else. It's basically native with a few extra features, and a central quest that is original, but also grindy. So in terms of story mods, this one tends to be a little redundant. At number 19, this is Medieval Conquest. This is another really good mod, but in reality, it's just a sub-mod of 1257 AD. So if you enjoy 1257 AD, that is the most ambitious medieval mod set in Europe, Medieval Conquest is the same mod, just with a few extra layers of kingdom management on top of it, which can be pretty cool for some people, but to me playing this mod, it just felt like playing 1257 AD again, so it's redundant. At number 18, this is Deeds of Arms and Chivalry. This mod is set during the 100 Years' War between France and England. In terms of ambitious mods, this one is as polished and as immersive as it gets. It's actually really hardcore for some of you that enjoy more challenge. However, the mod is based off another mod that I will mention later on, and as such, because they feel very similar, it's a good mod, but it did not bring anything really unique to me, so let's just move on. At number 17, we have Bellum Imperi. This mod is a perfect example of good but redundant, in that, as far as Roman mod goes, it's a very good one, well made all around, but it's also one of many Roman mods. So if you're looking for a good Roman mod, Bellum Imperi will do the trick for sure, but I can't think of any ways in which this mod distinguishes itself from other Roman mods I've played. It's pretty good, but it's not unique. And now we're moving on to pretty good. Not my top picks, but pretty good. At number 16, we have Honor and Glory. Honor and Glory is another mod set in Eastern Europe during the late medieval period / Renaissance, and in a lot of ways, it's very similar to the standalone expansion with Fire and Sword. So if you don't have with Fire and Sword, but you still want to experience it, Honor and Glory is a pretty good mod that will give you a very similar experience. Though it doesn't have a central story, it does allow you to start as a ruler, and overall the world is pretty immersive. So overall, Honor and Glory is a pretty solid mod. At number 15, this is Renaissance. This mod is as Italian Renaissance can get. I mean, it's in the time period. It covers Italy at the time with all the historical rulers and factions, and all the historical items, and the music. Overall, it's a very immersive mod for what it aimed to do, and if you wanted to experience the Italian Renaissance in WARBAND, this mod is just the go-to. It's really good, and I just don't have much to add. Similarly, at number 14, we have Sparta, which if you enjoy ancient Greece, this is the mod you should go to. The items, the music, everything is super immersive. It even replicated the Greek phalanx, which looks pretty awesome in my opinion. The only issue with the mod is that it's a bit buggy, and it's also designed to be extremely hardcore. Not an issue if, like me, you cheat a lot, but overall, it's a very solid mod, much like Renaissance. If you just want to experience ancient Greece, Sparta is a must-try. At number 13, we have 1429, The 100 Years' War, which is the mod that Deeds of Arms and Chivalry was originally based on. So this mod was made by a single guy as far as I know, and he did a terrific job. The world is immersive, there's a few unique quests, there's a bunch of different things you can do. Overall, for The 100 Years' War, you could go either with this one or Deeds of Arms and Chivalry, both are really good, but I do appreciate 1429 for being the more authentic one, being the first one that was made, and as such, I think it's a pretty good mod. It was the first experience I had with the 100 Years' War. Very good all around. At number 12, we have American Civil War Revived. In terms of gun mods, I would put this one in Between Empires as my top 2. American Civil War Revived is just that. It brings us to the American Civil War. We've got muskets, but the items, the music, everything is meant to be very immersive. But the mod is also centered around the commander. You are supposed to play this game as the commander of a large army, leading your army in battle, and as such, it makes for very hardcore battles. Just make sure you're not in the front line because you'll die instantly. And at number 11, we have Chronicles of Might and Magic. Chronicles of Might and Magic takes us to a fictional world that is filled with fantasy creatures and had lots of different spells. So in terms of actual fantasy mods, it's a really fun one to play. There's different things to do. There's different species that you can experiment with. Overall, it was a pretty solid mod. And before we get into the top picks, we have to talk about the honorable mentions. Mods that I do recognize as being pretty good, but have few issues of their own, so they don't really belong anywhere. And at number 10, we start with Dragon Ball Z Vegeta. This is the same modder that did the first 3 mods I mentioned. Dragon Ball Z is ridiculous. The fact that you could push Mountain Blade so hard to get to Dragon Ball Z is just insane in my opinion. And to be honest, it looks really good, and the commands work relatively well. However, I mean, it's still confusing as hell. So I gotta put it at number 10, if only for the fact that it's ridiculously ambitious and achieves a good chunk of it surprisingly well. At number 9, we have the Reckoning 3rd Stage. You still have the zombies with 3rd Stage, but the mod also brought the addition of helicopters and tanks and motorbikes and trucks and cars, and because of that, the mod is extremely ambitious, but it actually works really well. Like seriously, having tanks in battle is just a lot of fun. However, the mod is very buggy and prone to crashes, which is why it's not in my top picks. And finally, of all the 38 mods that I've played since making my last ranking, here are my top picks. At number 8, Violence Basketball, but Mountain Blade. I mean, I'm sorry, this is another mod made by that same creator, but this one, as ridiculous as it is, it's also very fun to play. Honestly, I'm not really sure how to describe it. Whether you're playing soccer or tennis or basketball, you could play as American soldiers, or Transformers, or characters from Naruto. It doesn't really seem to matter. Everything works surprisingly well. You just go anywhere and a match will start. It gives you all your team players that you need. It's just funny. Honestly, I ain't got much else to say. For what it intended to do, Violence Basketball is an amazing mod. I recommend everyone to at least give it a try, cause you will laugh your ass off. At number 7, a little more serious this time, we have Rome at War. Of all the Roman mods I've played, I do find this one stood out in a lot of really interesting ways. First of all, it's about the Roman in their early period, so they're not conquerors of the world, the typical legionary doesn't exist yet, but also what I really like about the mod is that it basically lets you not just start as a ruler or as a lord, it lets you pick your starting renown as well as your starting wealth. So in terms of all the mods out there, Rome at War is the only one I've played that really does everything to make sure you can just get right into it. As such, as far as Roman mod goes, it's a pretty good one, it's very immersive, but also the mod doesn't waste time just letting you enjoy all of its features, which is something I really like. At number 6, this is also a very ambitious one. This is Star Wars Conquest. The fact that someone could port Star Wars into Warband and make it work is amazing to me. Honestly, it's extremely immersive, the force powers, the lightsabers, the blasters, honestly everything works incredibly well for this mod. So you can just choose the Empire or choose the Rebels, and you can just have some Star Wars fun. It's not going to be the best Star Wars game out there, but as far as mod goes for Warband, it's surprisingly good. At number 5 we have Blood and Steel. This is actually a fairly old mod, but it only had one purpose, and it's to give the players the most ridiculous and hardcore battles possible. You have massive party sizes, massive bandit groups, and so you can just go from tavern to tavern, hire massive amounts of mercenaries, and then just lose half of them in the next battle, but it doesn't matter. The mod has fantasy, the mod has guns, the mod has bombs. Overall it works really well, but it's impossible to play without cheating. Honestly, Blood and Steel is just a ridiculous mod, but for as hardcore battles as Warband battles can get, Blood and Steel is the mod you should try out. At number 4 we have Rising Sun. In my previous ranking, one of my top picks was Gegokujo, which was set in feudal Japan. And so Rising Sun is basically the sequel to Gegokujo. It's still in Japan, it still retains a lot of the scenery, but it's set a few centuries later, so you have the addition of guns and gun tactics, and overall Rising Sun is just as good as Gegokujo, it just happens to be set later. So it was an instant favorite for me. At number 3, we have Touhou Gensokyo Warfare. This one I played in my latest video and I was genuinely surprised. It's one thing to play a mod based on an anime, but to have a mod that looks like an anime, that has a very deep, well-written story, and overall is very immersive, that's pretty impressive. And I've actually played it a bit more since doing my last review, and I still really enjoy it. It looks a bit weird, and if you're not already into Touhou, like I'm not, I'm sure some of the charm is lost on you. However, Touhou Gensokyo Warfare is just a really solid mod all around. Similarly, at number 2, we have Revenge of the Berserk, which I've already ranked fairly highly in different mod videos before. Revenge of the Berserk is based on the Berserk manga. You play as the main character, Guts, and it's a very story-driven mod. As Guts, you have this massive sword, you have this crossbow on your hand, and you just follow through the story, you fight demons, there's just a whole bunch of things going on. But overall, in terms of mods, it's a very fun fighting mod because you're just this massive brute with giant swords. But the story is also very deep, you can actually get invested into it, and it actually keeps you busy for quite some time. So because of that, Revenge of the Berserk is one of my favorite story-driven mods, and in terms of gameplay, while it relies a lot on the story, it's still very good on its own. At number 1, this is 457 AD, Fall of the Western Roman Empire. This one I played several months ago, and as the title suggests, it centers on the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. In terms of historical mods, it's probably one of the most immersive there is. I mean, the modding team behind it are really fixated on historical accuracy, they do a lot of research on the items, but the mod also offers a lot of very unique quests, some of them that can keep you busy for quite some time, and they're still working on the mod, so it's likely we'll see more features in the future. Overall, 457 AD is one of the best mods I've ever played on Warband, and it mostly has to do with a team behind it that just works their ass off to make it so. And that's pretty much it for today. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, as always, you can support me with a like and subscribe. That's a wrap for videos on this channel in 2023. Is it also a wrap for Warband mod videos? Is this the grand finale? I don't know, man. I can only milk so much stuff out of it. You guys don't even watch my other stuff, so I'm basically stuck. Anyway, I wish you all some happy holidays and a happy new year 2024 and beyond if you're watching later. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Camarade,